Welcome to a new video in my home automation series. And in one of my last videos, somebody said, can I do the video on the iHost 2.5.0 upgrade and the Home Assistant install? And that was already about a week ago. So I think in a past week, or at least since the 2.5 came out, there was a lot of article online how to install Home Assistant. And my initial impression was that before I actually dive into these documents, that this is going to be another Docker image that you can install on top of the on the iHost. But actually, it is quite different, because now with this process, you can just get rid of the sort of iHost installation and then just replace that completely with Home Assistant. So essentially, you buy the iHost just to install Home Assistant, and you don't care about any of the functionality that is delivered by Sonoff or eWeLink. And as you can see, this document is actually, I can't really figure out whether this is something which was done by Sonoff or eWeLink, or it is endorsed by them. But some of these articles are on Sonoff website as well. So they are, quite open about the fact that now you can just, buy their devices or buy the hardware and then use it for Home Assistant. And that's absolutely fine. So yeah. And the title is a little bit clickbaity because I didn't do the install yet, so I'm just going to go through the all the documentation I was able to find, because there are quite a few different documentations. They all point to the same procedure after all. I think probably I have found something which is probably an earlier, because it shows some hardware modifications which doesn't seem to be required anymore, because now you can do everything with the buttons on the top of the device. But essentially, in a summary, first, you want to upgrade your iHost to version 2.5.0. Well, actually, you want to do that because in 2.5.0 onwards, there is an export functionality to export all your Zigbee devices, so you don't have to set them up once you install Home Assistant. And once you are done that, you need a new memory card, so the micro SD card, which is plugged into the back of the iHost. And you have to use a memory card reader, completely separate from the iHost, and you have to download the Home Assistant OS and then flash it on that card. And then once that is done, you have to swap the card out, whatever that you are using at the moment for EV or the iHost, and then swap it with this special Home Assistant card. And then you have to boot the iHost into Home Assistant. So then it's just going to be a Home Assistant server, nothing else. You won't get any of the additional functionality. And as I said, with that export functionality that you were able to do from 2.5.0, now you can import all your devices into Zigbee, so you don't have to set them up manually like you did initially. So all of them are just going to be imported into this new Home Assistant version. So this looks fine. I think it's a fairly a fairly easy switch as far as I can understand. And technically, I would say the reason you want to do this because you like the iHost hardware. After all, where is my other screen? So after all, you have this box here. It has everything that you would need for a simple Home Assistant installation. It has the computing power, storage. It has Zigbee. It has some additional features like the Bluetooth and the speaker. So you don't have to. Nowadays you can buy ready-made Home Assistant, the Home Assistant Yellow and the Blue, so all these dedicated servers for Home Assistant. But you can buy the iHost as well. I haven't really checked the prices, how they compare. The other thing I would probably say is that I always feel that, I have a test Home Assistant on a Raspberry Pi 3B, which is quite an old hardware, and it is very, very slow. So I would definitely recommend that you at least buy the iHost with a bigger battery, the bigger storage, the bigger memory. So I think any hardware boost is probably going to help Home Assistant. The other caveat I would say, which is also mentioned here, that for some time now, the Home Assistant or the Home Assistant OS is created for 64-bit systems, and the iHost is 32 bits. So this the procedure, and the Home Assistant that you download is a special ported version that is going to run on the iHost, which means that whoever is putting time and effort into this to keep them updated and keep them on the same level as the main Home Assistant that you can get from Home Assistant, then it's going to be fine. I just don't know how long this is going to be available and what's going to be the functionality gap, because if you read this document, then it says yeah, so this is a 32-bit version, and some Home Assistant feature may not be compatible. So I couldn't get any more information what is the what are the differences or what could be the differences. But as you can see in the releases, so it is Home Assistant OS 15.1. So that's, and this was 3 days ago. So if I go back to the releases, 15.1, they upgraded. They just basically followed the Home Assistant version from 14.1 to 15.1 and Linux kernel updates. And you see the previous one. Oh, so that's how can I find the earlier releases? Latest. Anyway, so this is an active repository. Somebody is definitely taking the time to make all these changes, but I don't know if there is going to be any time in the future when that's no longer going to be supported, which means that you will stuck on the latest version on the iHost, because this is not exactly the same as the sort of the official 64-bit versions of Home Assistant. But nevertheless, it is updated and it works. And I mean, based on what I've read, Zigbee works, the Bluetooth works, and I think at the bottom of this page they said a couple of things about what they are planning to do in the future. So it's the speaker, the microphone, the Home Bridge add-on, and the eWeLink smart home add-on does not work at the moment. So that's the upcoming software. I mean, I have seen on another document that you can install the eWeLink smart home add-on. So maybe this hardware support means that maybe the local control of the eWeLink devices is not supported yet. But again, it really depends on how you want to use this device. Do you have any other sort of devices, or you are just picking the iHost because you want a hardware which can run Home Assistant? Before we go into this, let me just actually go to the iHost and let me do the installation. So as you can see, I am at 2.4.3 at the moment, and the version that you needed for all the migration is 2.5.1, but there is already a 2.5.0, but there is already a 2.5.1 version out. And I'm assuming it's the same thing what happened with 2.4, that by the time I came to actually install and review, there was like 3 or 2 major versions out because they found bugs and they were fixing bugs. So probably the same thing happened, that with 2.5.0 there was bugs that they started fixing, and now we are at 2.5. That was in 2.5.0, and now we have 2.5.1, which fixed some of these bugs. So added support. And it again shows what you need to do, which is on the other document as well. And then that's the thing that user can export the Zigbee data so that you can import them to ZHA or Zigbee to MQTT on your Home Assistant. And there was some bug fixes with the the screen stuff. Okay, let's do the upgrade because I'm assuming that it's going to take some time. And in the meantime, I'm just going to go back on to the documentation. So there is this big post. I'm going to leave the links to all of these in the video description. So there is this very long post on all the 2.5.0 features. And I have to say that I think if I scroll a little bit down, there is going to be like a detailed thing on what are the new stuff. So yeah, these are the new features. So there is a compatibility check, there is some stuff in the alarm and disarming, and an extended support for all these different devices. So some of them I'm probably is it the micro ZB or maybe this is an old micro. So I'm trying to figure out what is the latest device that it got supported now. But yeah, and there is some optimization, you know, the display and axis, and there are quite a bit of you know, bug fixes, and as you can see also bug fixes to some third-party devices as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of different changes and small tweaks here and there, so that required to increase the minor version of the iHost. Okay, so that's going to be one of the big documents that I'm going to go through. But I mean, I don't have most of these devices, to be honest. So I won't be able to test how these work. So we are going to look one of the few of these extra functionality. And maybe I'm just going to also take the time whilst we wait for the update to go through some of the other posts that I found. And that again leads us back to Home Assistant installation. So there is this bigger you know, post which talks about how to install the Home Assistant natively, but actually it mainly links to this you know, the official site as well, the GitHub, which I was showing you here. And I think, to be honest, that's probably the easiest thing to start with, because that's what I started with the in the beginning of this video as well, because this has an installation section. So it shows you what are the hardwares required, so what kind of TF card or micro SD card you need to buy, and you also need a card reader for it, and then you have to download a flasher software, for example the Balena Etcher that I used for other projects as well. So this is a very easy program to use, and then you download the latest iHost version, and then you can, you know, go here in the release. So the current version is 15.1, and it even shows you which file that you need to download. So that's the .image.xz. So every release there are a couple of files, so that's what you need to download, and then you run Balena Etcher, and then you flash this over the micro SD card. So that's all happening in your laptop. So the card reader is connected to your laptop, and the upgrade is ready. So probably it's just going to leave a couple of more minutes for the iHost to get ready and settle down. So you flash it, and then you know, it's the TF card is going to be flashed with the Home Assistant version, and you can do the same with the Pi imager as well if you choose that. So yeah, you can go through these steps here, you can follow them here. Okay, and then you have this migration option that we are going to look at in a couple of minutes. So again, this is only required if you already have a Zigbee network and you don't want to set it up again, so you just want to migrate it into Home Assistant. If you are starting with something completely new, you can just skip this step. And then the next one is booting into Home Assistant. So you swap the SD cards. So you insert a pre-flashed SD card into the SD card slot. So again, that's the, do I have enough cables? I just barely have. So that's the TF card slot here. And it's going to tell you to to push the mute button. So that's the mute button, not this one, but that's the next one. So the second from the front, which is this mute, and it arrows. So that's the one that you need to press. So you can see, connect the network cable and power it up, and then repeatedly press the mute button on the top until the blue strip, so that's the thing on the front of the iHost, sorry, the red strip goes into blue breathing pattern. And then if the indicator starts doing that, then you have to wait until 10 minutes for the Home Assistant web interface to appear. In another post, somebody was saying half an hour. So yeah, keep that in mind. It might not be 10 minutes. You have to give it time. To be honest, I've noticed that in, you know, on my Raspberry Pi, as I said, I do have a Raspberry Pi 3B for Home Assistant just for testing, and takes ages to boot up into Home Assistant. So yeah, maybe in the beginning you can give it a little bit more than 10 minutes as well. But then it should appear on this IP. So that's just the Home Assistant.local.8123. That's the default port for Home Assistant. And yeah, I mean, it talks about boot failures. So if anything happens and then it starts the red reading, so that was the booting error, and then you can try power cycling the iHost without pressing any buttons, and it's going to try to boot in again. And if not, then there are some troubleshooting, options here as well. And then there is an interesting section here as well, which talks about switching back to the eWeLink Cube. So that's basically switching back from Home Assistant back to the eWeLink Cube version or the normal iHost version. And interestingly here it says, just power cycle the iHost and then, press the mute button again, repeatedly single press. So that's just repeatedly press within 3 seconds. I mean, I find this one a little bit interesting. I mean, we just replaced the TF card with another TF card which has Home Assistant on it. So how possibly you can boot back to the old version where your Docker images and everything is stored in a TF card? So I'm wondering if something is missed in here, which, yeah. But then it should boot back to the old, the original version if you need that for any reason. So I'm not really sure. I mean, I guess if you made your mind that you want to use Home Assistant, you are unlikely to go back unless you are somebody like me who, uses the same hardware for 2 different purposes and switching back between operating systems for experimental reasons. But I would have assumed that maybe just switching the SD card around would, do the trick from switching from one operating system to another. Anyway, yeah, and the rest of the documentation talks about the Wi-Fi setup and the Bluetooth and how you set up the Zigbee coordinator, and then that's it. And then there was another, that was the backup function of how you back up. That's also an interesting article. So how you can back up the Zigbee to Cube. So that's basically the iHost Zigbee setup, and then restore it into Home Assistant. So I think I'm just going to leave this here as well, because it has a lot of screenshots how you go through this process, especially in Home Assistant. And it looks to be, quite a few different steps involved. So it's probably just a process that you have to go through. And this is a very similar documentation again from the Son of Tech website on iHost, and then how you talk to home, how you convert it to Home Assistant. And then in the beginning it talks about how you do, what are the functions in the regular iHost, and then it goes into installing the Home Assistant version. As you can see, when they took these screenshots, it was version 12.0 RC1, and now we are already at 15.1. And so, I mean, essentially it's the same screenshots. Maybe they have some of the steps are explained in a little bit less details, or some of these steps are in more details. So I would probably use, I would advise to use both of the pages, because it only mentions a couple of steps about, flashing and everything, but then it goes into more details of how you set up the Home Assistant. So whoever did this, he was using French, so this is why the screenshots are all in French. Again, he says it took 20 minutes for the first page to arrive. So again, as I said, if it doesn't come in 10 minutes, maybe give it 20 or 30 minutes. But then you set up the Home Assistant. So I think this shows a little bit more steps on setting up the Home Assistant. And especially here, there is a section of how you install this Silicon Labs flasher, which is required for the Zigbee. So maybe this was required for 12.1, and maybe this is not required for the version 15 anymore. But if for any reason that's required, again, this is a good documentation, what ports to select and where the devices are and baud rate and that sort of stuff. So, and then how you install ZHA or Zigbee to MQTT. So, a fairly detailed documentation. And actually, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, it says, if you want to read the original blog post in French, which is this, then you can do that as well. The only reason I'm also including this French version, because in here, sorry if I doing a lot of scrolling. If here it says remove the bottom cover with the 2 screws, carefully disassemble the right side panel, and it actually, this has the screenshots of how you do that. So that's, you put the SD card, and then under the pad you find some screws, and then you remove the right panel, and then you had to short those 2 pads, which the newer documentation doesn't say anything about that. So I assume that they have finally managed to find a way to use the button on the top, so the mute button, instead of doing all this hardware hack, which obviously would void the warranty. So you can skip this section, and it doesn't seem to be required anymore. And and then that's it. And so I may also include this blog post, but again, it talks a lot about the Home Assistant installation, and a lot of people were writing about what's worked and what didn't work. But I think, the GitHub, where you need to download the image, that has a fairly decent documentation already. Okay, now let's go back to the iHost, and then let's look at what's new. So we have upgraded to 2.5.1, and if I look at the details now, I can see, so that was my earlier release. So there was like a lot of bug fixes and an optimization. I don't think I would be able to find all these, because I might not have all the devices or the cast things set up, but you can read all about this. And again, for the device support, I don't think I have all the devices here. So let me just look at these compatibility settings. So I think it's actually here in the settings. So settings and settings. So we have compatibility. And essentially it is basically just a huge database of different products and vendors, and you can just tell what is working or what is supported from a particular device. And there are some feedback options available. So if you say that, oh yeah, I tested it and it works, you can leave a thumbs up here. But obviously, it even includes some of the eWeLink stuff. But you look at this, found 4,000 entries. So definitely this is a huge list. I'm not really sure how they compile this list, but they must have maybe there is some online repository of all the different Zigbee devices that are supported. So that's one of the settings. And then the other one is actually here. You see this backup and restore. So we had this backup and restore that was delivered in 2.4, and now we have this export Zigbee data. So this is where we can export the settings, and then we can import that into ZHA or Zigbee to MQTT in order to migrate all the devices over. And then the export is just like that. It creates this tar.gz file, and that's what you need to import. And as I said, there was this other article, how you do the importing, which again involves quite a few different steps in Home Assistant. So you need to upgrade to this version first in order for this option to appear, and then you can switch to Home Assistant. And the last thing I wanted to check is in the Docker images and the eWeLink Smart Home, because if you remember, there was a lot of new device support shown here, and I usually come here and then start syncing all the devices that are now being supported. And you can see I have the sync option appearing on quite a few different devices which were probably not available for syncing in the past. So yeah, there are definitely new devices that are available to support, and then it's also scanning the devices that are available in the LAN. And to be honest, a lot of these devices I only have in test boards and various places where I only power them up for testing, so it won't be able to find all of them, because to be honest, most of them are probably offline. But I think that's pretty much it. So that's all about the 2.5.1 firmware upgrade on the iHost and the possible Home Assistant installation. So let me know if you are interested in this, and then maybe also just let me know why you are particularly interested in running Home Assistant on the iHost. Is it just an easily available device for you to purchase as a Home Assistant server? Because I think there are plenty of other options available, but those other options might be much more difficult to buy, or maybe not available locally in the country where you are in. I want to hear your opinion, because I think probably this device has limitations, mostly because it's 32-bit, and the home, as I said, Home Assistant is now moved to like a 64-bit architecture. So at some point down the line, this is no longer going to be supported. There will be some features which they will not be able to port into 32-bit. It could be many years down the line. It could be features that you might not be interested in, and the core functionality is going to be working. I mean, you can keep it on the current version as long as you like. If you're not using new devices or new features, then obviously the current version is just going to work. So yeah, let me know why you would consider this as your main Home Assistant server. But I think that's all going to be for now. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.